Hey guys, Victor here, coming at you again with another deck profile, and today's focus is going to be on Tearlaments Yubel. Yep, you heard that right. We're going to be playing a Tearlaments Yubel deck, and that's because I really like Tearlament, I really like Yubel. I really wanted to find some kind of like middle ground to help combine the two, and honestly, with the build that I came up with, it's surprisingly competent. So, yeah, I pretty much recently took this to regional this past weekend, and even though I didn't do the greatest, I did better than I thought I would do, which is 0-2 drop. I pretty much made it all the way until like round 8 of a 10-round regional. So, you know, that's a pretty good bonus for a deck that I pretty much threw together at the very last minute without testing entirely. But even so, through my matches at the regional, I actually gained like a lot of really valuable experiences, and I really wanted to share those ideas with you in this deck profile. So with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into it. Now, as always, we're going to be starting off with the monster lineup, but I just wanted to point out before we actually get to it that I wasn't really sure when deck building, you know, if I wanted to focus on the Tearlament aspect of the deck or if I wanted to focus on the Yubel aspect. And ultimately, I decided to lean more towards the Tearlament portion just because in the current state of Yubel, let's face it, a single Ash Blossom can more than just end your turn. So I wanted the flexibility that the Tearlaments offer you way more than the actual like Yubel engine, at least until like the Grave Squirmer or the Nightmare Throne gets released. But until then, I definitely lean more towards Tearlaments. So as a result, we're pretty much going to be playing the full package, which means we're playing 3 Tearlaments kashtira on normal or special. It mills 3 for either you or your opponent, and then when it's sent to the grave, you get to mill 2 more. You're going to be playing 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart. I decided to max out on this, and you may be wondering, why would I play 3 of this if like your main focus on a Yubel deck should be normal summoning cards like Dark Beckoning Beast or Samsara D Lotus? And to that I say, this is your superior normal summon. You pretty much always want to start off with Tearlaments Reinoheart because we are going to be playing the Bahamut Toad package, and as a result, being able to get that 1 negate up is just invaluable. And even so, right, even if you can't get to that, you can still send cards like Tearlaments kashtira to mill 2 more. You can still fusion summon if you send merrli, Scheiren, Havnis, whatever. And we are going to be playing the max copies of Tearlaments Scream, so just being able to go with 3 Scream and 3 Reinoheart just gets your engine going pretty much immediately. And then speaking of the fusioners, we're going to be playing the 1 merrli, the 1 Havnis, and the 1 Scheiren because we're only allowed to play 1 of each. And that's it for the Tearlament portion of the deck. I was considering playing 2, maybe even 3 Fenrirs, but ultimately I just decided it wasn't really worth it in order to keep the deck down to 40, even though Fenrir is a phenomenal card and can pretty much just like win a lot of games on the spot because it's able to banish really important aspects face down and just make it very difficult for your opponent to get them back and get back in the game. But it's honestly whatever. You don't need them, but they do help a lot. And then now that we're focused on the Tearlament portion, let's talk about the Yubel aspect of the deck. So we're going to be playing 3 Spirit of Yubels. This card, you have to play 3 of it. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you're playing a Yubel deck, this card has to be at 3. It just does so much for the deck, right? It's a battle trap because much like Battle Fader, where if your opponent declares an attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, and then it can't be destroyed by battle. If they're able to get rid of it, however, with like a card effect, it just floats into the original Yubel, and then that Yubel floats into Terror Incarnate, and it just gets out of hand really quickly. But even so, like its other effects are also really good at helping you get your engine going, right? Because when it's special summoned, you can either set or add to your hand a spell or trap that mentions Yubel, and that's pretty much like the entire deck, right? Like that's what it does. It just gets your engine going. So you have to play 3 of it, and this is probably like one of the more important cards that you also want to mill just because it's very easy to get it back. Then to go with the Spirit of Yubels, we're only playing 2 Samsara D Lotus. Now this is gonna seem really weird because every single Yubel deck plays this at 3, right? But as I mentioned earlier, this is not our focus. Our main monster that we want to summon is Tearlaments Reinoheart. We'd much rather just end up milling this card or discarding it somehow to trigger other effects like Scheiren than actually normal summon it. And a lot of the times you can just bait cards out very easily, and then later on in the turn you bring this back, and then you can go into your Yubel engine, and then your Yubel engine, after they've wasted all their resources on the Tearlament aspect, can just completely win the game on its own. So yeah, I think 2 is probably the perfect number for this card. I never really found myself needing more than that. And yeah, and then for the original Yubels, you just play the 1 OG Yubel, and then to go with that, the 1 Terror Incarnate. You could consider playing Ultimate Nightmare, but I don't really think it's needed. And I'm going to be honest, I don't even really like playing Terror Incarnate, even though you have to, just because I kept drawing it, and it's such a pain seeing just a completely dead card in your hand, even though you can special summon it eventually. I'd rather all my cards actually do something, which is why one of the main reasons why I don't play the Ultimate Nightmare. But even if you don't play the Ultimate Nightmare, the mind game is still in your opponent's head, right? Because a lot of people are very unfamiliar with this deck, so they'll think, oh man, if I get rid of that one, they're just going to bring out the other big guy, and I don't even know what that one does. So it does tend to panic and threaten them, even if you're not playing it. But yeah, that's just the thing that happens from my experience when people go up against Yubel decks. Next, we're only going to be playing one Dark Beckoning Beast. This is probably going to be like the most controversial opinion, just because why would you only play one, right? In most Yubel decks you see people playing 2, even 3, but like I said, Reinoheart is our preferred normal summon, and even if you end up drawing this with like a Spirit Gates, normally that would be the end of it, right? Because you can't activate your Spirit Gates if you can't add something like Dark Beckoning Beast to your hand. But because we play Tearlament cards, we just go normal Rhino or send Havnis, merrli, Scheiren somehow with like a Foolish Burial or whatever, and then we can shuffle this card back into the bottom of the deck, and our Spirit Gates are live again, which is something that the normal Yubel deck just can't do. So for this specific version, I feel like one Dark Beckoning Beast is honestly just perfect, just because you never really want to draw too many of them, or you pretty much never want to draw this card, period, if I'm being honest. You always want to open the Spirit Gates instead. But yeah, one, perfectly fine. And then for the final monster, we're just playing one Unchained Soul Sharvara. We are playing a small Unchained engine, and it does have some synergy because you're able to pop, for example, your Tearlaments sullieks or your Tearlaments Screams if they're face down to provide you with free fodder. And I just really like what the Unchained engine offers. So with that, that's the monster lineup, and now we can finally move on to the spell and trap portion of the deck. Now when it comes to the spells and traps, we're going to be playing like a lot of them, but it's okay because most of them are pretty much like multiples, right? Usually 3 ofs, so as a result there isn't really like a lot of diversity, but I feel like it's still pretty important to max out on other cards we're playing. So as a result, we're going to be playing 3 Primeval Planet Perlereino. Like I said, this Yubel Tearlament deck is more focused on the Tearlament portion, so you want to have their field spell that pretty much just gives you access to any Tearlament monster and gets your entire engine going. Then to go with that, you're going to be playing 3 Tearlaments Scream. Even in the non-Yubel version, right, for normal Tearlament, you'd typically still want to be playing 3 of this, just because, like, if you do get stopped, which will happen eventually, whether you get hit by Droll or a very inopportune Ash, Effect Bill, or whatever, as long as you have this, plus even, like, if you just have, like, Reinoheart, Scream Pass, right, that's still enough to be able to play on your opponent's turn, potentially, just because you get those 3 mills. If you hit any tier cards, you're pretty much just good to go. But yeah, 3 Scream, really, really good. To go with the Scream, we're going to be playing 3 Super Polymerization. If you're playing normal Tearlament or if you're playing normal Yubel, 3 Super Poly is a must-have, and it's no different for this version. It just helps you break so many boards, and even if you're not breaking a board, right, as opposed to normal tier, if you just set this, because this is a Yubel deck, you're still going to have the opportunity to wipe your opponent's board during their turn as long as you have a Tearlament monster, or not a Tearlament monster, but a Yubel monster, and sometimes I can just straight up end the game. Next, we're going to be playing 3 Nightmare Pain. To go with our 3 Spirit of Yubel, this card also does pretty much everything. You just destroy a dark monster in order to search for any card that has Yubel or is Yubel. And I don't know if you noticed, but outside of Reinoheart and Tier Cash, all your main tier monsters are dark. So you can go, for example, normal summon merrli, mill 3, activate Nightmare Pain, destroy merrli, search out your Spirit of Yubel, Samsara Lotus, Eternal Favorite, whatever, and then you're going to be able to trigger your merrli's effective fusion summon, which I think is pretty cool, honestly, and there's like a lot of really cool utility in that. And yeah, this is pretty much like one of the few cards that you pretty much always want to open in your hand, just because it does that much. And to go with that, we're going to be playing 3 Opening of the Spirit Gates. Like I said, I don't really care about Dark Beckoning Beast, but I do care about Opening of the Spirit Gates, and you pretty much always want to see this card in your opening hand. In my opinion, this is probably the most important spell card, period, just because it does so much for the deck, right? The moment it's on the board, it's pretty much an insta reborn every single turn for your Yubel monsters. You can add very key continuous spell cards from your deck or from your graveyard back to your hand if you control a level 10 monster, which your Yubel and Spirit of Yubel are. And I don't know if you know this, but Tearlaments Scream, wherever it may be, just so happens to be a continuous spell. So it is one of the cards that Opening of the Spirit Gates can add back to your hand, and which is really good, right? If you have this plus Tearlaments Scream in your hand, even just like Nightmare Pain, which you can also add back off your opening of the spirit gates is just phenomenal, and just increases your advantage so much more, and just increases the amount of plays you can make. So yeah, 3 opening of the spirit gates are really good. And like I said, even though we only play the 1 dark beckoning beast, it's perfectly fine, because thanks to the Tearlament portion of the deck, we can just shuffle it back to the bottom of the deck, and these cards are pretty much always going to be live. Yeah, you definitely have to play 3 of this. I love this card so much for its utility and what it's able to do. Then we just play a bunch of good 1-ofs, and by a bunch I mean 3. You play the 1 Tearlaments Grief. Whether you're special summoning Reinoheart, Tear Cash, or even if you have like a face-up dark monster, right? You can special summon Tearlaments merrli, send those, and then send like a Yubel monster to the grave or whatever. You have a lot of uses for this card, and the one that we play is pretty good. Then you have the 1 Foolish Burial, basically the same thing, but it has the added bonus of being able to send your Yubel cards. So if you have an opening of the Spirit Gates but your hand is pretty weak, you just activate Foolish Burial, then you can send your Samsara Lotus, you can reborn the Samsara Lotus, and then you can just continue on with your normal Yubel combos. And for the final one, we're just playing the 1 for 1. It's a good card. It special summons your Samsara Lotus from your deck, which means that you don't have to commit your normal summon to it as long as you have this card, because you can always bring it out somehow. And that's it for the spell portions. And then we do play a couple traps. So we're going to be playing the 2 Tearlaments sulliek, just the negate for monster effects. It sends a card, normally your Tearlament monsters. If it goes to the graveyard, you can search for any Tearlament monster, and it's very easy to trigger this thanks to the fact that we do play Sharvara. You just set this, activate Sharvara, destroy this, special Sharvara, and then you trigger its effect to search out probably like a Tearlaments kashtira more than likely. But there are some cases where something like a Tearlaments Reinoheart or a Tearlaments Scheiren could just end up winning the game right then and there. And then we just played 2 1-ofs, being the 1 Abominable Chamber of the Unchained. This is basically what you're going to get off the Unchained Soul Sharvara. As I stated before, I prefer this one's utility over the pop, just because your Unchained Soul of Rage, for example, isn't always going to be on the field, and that's perfectly fine, right? As long as it's in the graveyard and you have this, you can bring it back and you can just continue on with your plays and interrupting your opponent's board. And then for the final trap, you're playing the 1 Eternal Favorite, because it's very good in Yubel. And with that, that's the main deck, 40 cards as always, and now we can move on to the extra deck. Now, I know I said that the main, whether it's like the monster portion or the spell and trap portion, is extremely tight, but the extra deck was even more difficult to work with, just because there's so many good cards that I really wanted to include, whether it's like Typhon or Time Thief Redoer, things of that nature that you just couldn't fit because the space is so tight. But ultimately, I decided on these 15 cards, and I'm pretty happy about it, if I'm being honest. So the first one, we're going to be talking about Superdreadnought Rail Cannon Gustav Max. This is going to be your main time card, just because you detach a material, you burn for 2k. But even if you're not in time, right? When people see Yubels, they just assume if they leave no monsters on the field, they're going to be okay. And they couldn't be any farther from the truth, at least in this specific version. Even like pure Yubel, though, that doesn't work, because you just make this guy, and then you overlay it with Superdreadnought Rail Cannon Juggernaut Liebe, which you detach a material, it becomes 6k attack, and you just attack directly, or you attack their monster for game. And it's very easy to OTK whether they want to commit monsters to the field or not. So you pretty much just have to include this package. And yeah, it's pretty good. And then, as I said earlier, we are playing the Bahamut Shark with the Toadally awesome play. It's like stupid easy to just be able to summon this out, just because all you have to do is normal summon Reinoheart. Pretty much every single monster in this deck is a dark. So after you fusion summon, you make Mud Dragon of the Swamp, you overlay for your Bahamut Shark, you special summon Toad, and then your Bahamut Shark becomes free fodder for any potential link plays that you might want to perform, which there are a couple in this deck that are really good. And then speaking of links, we can now focus on that, because that's it for the Exceed monsters. You play the 1 Salamangreat Almiraj on the chance that you do end up normal summoning Dark Beckoning Beast. It's pretty much never going to happen, but if it does, or even if you go like normal summon Samsara Lotus and they imperm or effect Veiler, as long as you have access to Spirit Gates or opening of the Spirit Gates, you can just make this and then bring it back, and you're going to be good to go, honestly. So you have to play the 1. Then we play a bunch of Link 2s, being the first one being the Unchained Soul Lord of Yama. Since we are playing the Unchained package, you have to play at least one of this, and it basically just adds Sharvara back from either your deck or your graveyard to your hand. So if you mill it, it's not the end of the world. You can just get it back with Unchained Soul Lord of Yama. And I also forgot to mention that if you do end up milling Sharvara, for example, you do trigger its effects to set your Abominables face down. So there's a little bit more synergy with that, I guess. Then to go with the Unchained Soul Lord of Yama, you play the 1 Unchained Soul Lord of Rage, or Unchained Soul of Rage. Sorry, there's no lord in that name. Just another really good card. You're able to take your opponent's resources and then link someone into something else. And that's it for the Unchained monsters, but we are playing another IP Madquerena. Basically the same thing as this, but you use your own monsters instead. And then what you're typically going to be summoning off of these two is SP Little Knight. Card is just phenomenal, you know, it does pretty much everything. On summon, if you use like an extra deck monster, you get to banish a card. It helps you dodge cards like Imperm or Veiler. It just does so much. And then for the final link monster, we're going to be playing one Muckraker from the underworld. Now, this may seem terrible at first just because its effect is, you know, you target a fiend monster in your graveyard, you discard a card, then special summon that monster, but for the rest of this turn you're locked into fiends. The other effect doesn't matter. That's the only one that we're going to focus on because this is usually going to be attributed by Yubel's maintenance cost or something, but that's perfectly fine. You know, if you're locked into fiends, that's perfectly good. Just make sure you use your Yubel monsters beforehand because you can't special summon a single one of them, whether it's like Scheiren, Havnis, merrli, Reinoheart, Tear Cash, whatever. You can't summon those. However, there is a Tearlament monster that we can summon that belongs in the extra deck, and that card is Tearlaments Heart, because this just so happens to be a fiend monster, which, you know, more synergy, yay. So there's some really cool things you can do, right? You can go, once your graveyard's filled up, you can go Muckraker, discard, I don't know, it doesn't matter which one you discard, whether it's merrli, Havnis, Scheiren, discard them, bring back your Spirit of Yubel, trigger your Spirit of Yubel and your Tearlaments Scheiren, merrli, whatever. You make Heart, and then the Heart plus the Yubel is just a very, very insurmountable wall for your opponent to come over. And even if you make this like later in the turn, right? Say you don't even make this turn one, and you have a Tearlaments Heart in your graveyard because they ran it over by battle, or they just destroyed it after it came back one too many times a turn. You can still just discard, target Heart, bring it back. Heart's effect will pretty much reset it, so it'll shuffle something back, and then if they destroy it again, you'll get its effect to try and reborn itself. So, you know, pretty good, at least in my honest opinion. And then after that, we're just playing super poly targets, basically being the one Mud Dragon of the Swamp, the one Garura Wings of Resonant Life, and the one Predaplant Dragostapelia. Just good generic cards. But I really enjoy the Mud Dragon and Predaplant Dragostapelia line just because even if you're not super polying, thanks to the Tearlament monsters such as Havnis, merrli, and Scheiren, you can pretty much just like infinitely recycle these two, right? You go Mud Dragon of the Swamp, and then once it leaves the field, you fusion it away for Predaplant Dragostapelia, and then when this leaves the field, you can fusion summon it away to make Mud Dragon of the Swamp again, and it's just like an infinite cycle that just continuously outgrinds your opponent. And I actually pulled that off at the regional, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, that's neither here or there. And then for the final monster, you're of course playing the one Yubel, the Loving Defender Forever. With that, that's the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time when I, make something interesting like this. But yeah, until then, see ya.